Welcome to the latest episode of Enterprising Minds. Dave and Alex are here. Thanks for tuning in, checking it out. We are going to do a little bit of then and now today. We were talking about digital strategy and how it's changed from when we were just out of school or working on the agency side, and what's happened over the last 10, 15 or more years, especially with how things have changed in the last couple of years. So, Alex, what are your opening statements, opening thoughts, debate style things?
Yeah. It's also a mix of what hasn't changed. Mm-hmm. That's I think an important kind of thread that we're going to kind of keep on touching as we kind of keep this conversation going. One interesting one that hit me was thinking about how email marketing has changed throughout time. And there was certain kind of like trends and pickups and changes that I think actually start to illustrate some of digital marketing fairly well throughout the time period I'm going to start with, back to 2005 to today. Mm-hmm. And broad strokes, basically, very beginning, it was HTML-based, difficult, kind of programming intensive more than the kind of user experience side of things. So think about more from a tech side than a front end side. And that changed rapidly. So systems got better, things got more complex. It also became a lot more important for businesses because it worked. It sold things. It got sales to be nurtured, pipelines to happen. So it became fairly important. And there was a point I was thinking about it. I worked at an agency that had a fantastic email team. And I think it was 7 people to send a really good email. Mm-hmm. So it reached this complexity level. It's not just your one website person who did everything. Right. Now it's specialized skill sets. The complexity has grown significantly. And to do it well, you have these specialists in these different areas. So you have a copywriter, a front-end developer who creates the Photoshop files, a back-end developer then cuts that back into CSS, HTML, whatever you're sending it actually as. You have your database administrator who basically is actually doing the send. You have a project manager over the entire thing. You have an analytics person on the report out. Missing one. There's probably one more that's in that mix too. But those are it's just different career types. Those people don't necessarily even overlap. They could be like the backend developer is not the copywriter. These are very different folks. So to do that really well suddenly becomes this huge burden to get to that level. Add a couple more years and we start to see more user-friendly MailChimp sort of systems are out. Complexity drops down. We can use templates from HubSpot. We can just basically send some real basic stuff. And as long as you can write an email or write a document of any type, you can write not great, but you can write an email and you can send it out yourself. You can do it yourself. You don't have to have the programming knowledge anymore. That burden is gone. Mm-hmm. Use preset templates. That burden is gone. The system has its own analytics. That burden is gone. Like things are shifting, right? Move it forward a little bit more. Now we've got the Canned Spam Act. We've got the different blacklists and gray lists from the different email providers. Mm-hmm. It's complex as heck. I mean, there's how you're handling people's data nowadays. If you got their email address, great. But how do you store it? What do you do with it? What are you allowed to do with it? What country are they from? Region? Suddenly the complexity jumps up from a legal standpoint. And now you're back to those email specialists basically being like the people who know all the little gritty details that might be giant liability. So important to have around. So you get this kind of push and pull thing, basically from the base technology. You've got a camera, you can have a YouTube channel, to I have a massive production team with full-on directors, specialists, editors, copywriters, everybody else, special effects artists, you name it. And I'm basically making like a mini movie for my YouTube channel now. Like complexity suddenly jumps up again. Tools get better, drops down again. Like kind of keeps going through this push and pull. Have you seen something similar with that? Like, do you see that same kind of thread in other areas?
Oh, absolutely. I think, the thing that jumps out the way you describe it, and which is something I think we've talked about before, is the fact that there's this like window of specialization, where each new tactic, or even if it's not too new, it gets a little bit of a spotlight more, right? Mm-hmm. That happens for a little bit, and then it goes away, and then it happens a little bit again, and it goes away. And yeah, I think the piece of the marketing technology and those things changing always has the promise of, we're going to make it easier. So now you can do this tactic that's converting really, really well. And you can do, yada, yada. So then it just becomes another thing on the to-do list, which just means you're doing more things less well.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something with the more recent things with AI that you're starting to see, where it's like, yeah, it could do my LinkedIn posts. It could do my emails. It could do this, that, and the other.
Right.
But all of them are still just bleh, because they're average, crap. So if you were a really crappy email writer, AI might be helping you now,
Sure,
but then also I think the specialization, we've gone really deep into that over the last like 10, 15 years, right? Because it's no longer just, oh, I'm an email specialist. I'm an email specialist for mass consumer designer clothes and makeup. I'm an email specialist for the automotive industry, right? Because now each one has their own feel. They have their own faux pas. They have all of these things. Yeah, and it is interesting how things are shifting and the skill sets get transferable. But I think we've seen that a lot. The other thing to call out are the platform changes. Not specific to email marketing, but that is representative of that one particular channel. But if you look at social media, right, when we first started, doing marketing in 2008, 2009, you still had the possibility of posting something and people actually finding it. And, I think Ruthi and I talked about this a while back, where it was like when I was doing music at that time, bands were having honest discussions about, do I not have a website or do I only have a Facebook page? Because the barrier to entry on the Facebook page was so much cheaper. It was zero, right? Rather than registering the domain and figuring out how to build a website and doing all that stuff. That's what they were doing. And then all of a sudden it was, surprise, Facebook pages are no longer going to be this, that, we're not going to prioritize them, yada, yada. And now, okay, crap. Now what do we do? Those platform changes are the biggest thing, that I've been thinking of, especially recently, because there's been a number of updates recently with that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, kind of consistently see those shifts. What are some things that you see as kind of dropped off over that time? So organic social posting is actually a great one of something that has dropped off. Mm-hmm. You just don't get the visibility and the reach anymore. If you promote it, yes, there is some chance of virality still with organic content. However, it's pretty designed and tailored, and it's also very difficult to do repeatedly. Mm-hmm. Some have been able to handle it, but still with gigantic costs up front of still the production value and the rest. So still difficult to kind of hit that. What else is something that's dropped off?
Honestly, the thing that jumps out to me is mass communications, fundamental idea of mass communications. Mm-hmm. It used to be that, when I first started doing some PR work and audience targeting and doing that kind of stuff, it was, okay, I can go to NBC and get this type of audience. I can go to this magazine and get, this type of audience, broad brushes. Now that is so much more specialized, where it's like, okay, there's no longer that crossover of NBC, Fox, CBS, ABC news people. They are very distinct audiences. And if you're getting your news from Instagram, but Instagram has these algorithm changes that won't promote voting or won't promote local news or won't, whatever else. It makes reaching audiences much, 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 much harder.
Yeah.
Actually, local news is one that people don't often think about, but that has died hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's kind of hyperbole, but not really.
I'm pretty quick.
Yeah.
Like, worked and then it failed. And that was it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's an opportunity for local content. I do think that there's some opportunity there. It's going to be harder, and you're going to have to put a flag in the ground for that. But I do think there are some opportunities there. But between then and now, yeah, one of the first things I did back then was reach out to the local newspapers because I was more likely to get coverage in those newspapers so that I could then ladder that up to be like, hey, we've already been covered in these papers. Yeah. You don't have to worry about, launching us or talking about us because we've already been in the papers or the magazines or the whatever else. I think PR changed a lot too. I've been out of the game for a while, but just kind of keep an eye on that. You have, fewer media people being pitched by more people because the pitches can be automated now. You get the distribution lists and the templated emails, and now it's harder to find the real thing. So yeah, those cold email pitches are less and less and less effective because why would you when you have 20,000 emails that you have to, that you're being pitched on? And like, I even get that from this podcast. I get these emails going, hey, I love your show. We want to pitch you this person. It's like, if you actually listened, you would know we've never had a guest on. So why you've just shown to me that you don't even pay attention. We're on some list of podcasts, and then, yeah. Sorry. Ruthi is going to jump in late. So
right.
Yay. Last minute change to the episode.
Yeah, bring it on.
So yeah, those are things that jumped out, to me once we first pitched this, or pitched the idea of talking about this. I do think that organic piece and that the one mindset that used to work but just completely doesn't now is the if you build it, they will come. That field of dreams mentality was amazing when it lasted, and it has not lasted, unfortunately.
I think actually some of these different platforms, especially the ones where it's a content platform, there's a trend with it. Basically, it comes out and it's free. Mm-hmm. And then they eventually get their advertising, together enough to basically offer advertising for the first time. And you start seeing that. And then basically those advertising prices, if you watch those prices, they also start to rise significantly over a period of time as well, especially for whatever the kind of core audiences are. So actually from an outside observer, you can still watch some of these systems and say, the rise of Pinterest, the rise of LinkedIn, the kind of realize, the second life of LinkedIn that's going on right now, or the death of Second Life, speaking of their social one. But you start to look at those different values. I mean, you can track that stuff. Like there was a point where I was doing a Facebook campaign that was targeting college kids, a core Facebook audience during basically Facebook's peak with that audience. And you're paying 15 cents a click. Yeah. And now that's insane. The idea that you get 15 cents a click on anything on their entire network, because the demand is now grown and the advertising network is there. They're pushing it. There's their reps. I mean, they've got that system set up. So you can see those numbers. I mean, you can see that kind of trend with those platforms as well. Yeah, there's one other one that I guess we haven't talked about yet is disruptive technologies and disruptive platforms. So speaking of not just new platforms, kind of variations of mass media and new forms of advertising, new places to basically throw the same ad in a slightly different format. It's billboard, now it's cut up. Let's be honest, it hasn't changed that much. and basically you kind of shifting that inventory around. But yeah, like things like Uber and its massive increase, and you saw the loss of taxi fleets, but now there's fleets on Uber. I mean, things have changed significantly with those platforms too. There's been other disruptive ones out there too. Ruthi, you're going to mention Airbnb. That's kind of the other one that comes to mind.
Yeah. So as I think about it, 10 years ago when I was doing much more, when I had much more of a marketing focus, it was a lot of the things that I've heard, Alex, you mention. And we used to work with college students as well, as there was a number of on-campus events, and there was a number of, sort of larger conferences types events, but it was always, you had the in-person and then you had the online, and they were separated, but there was always discussion about how you're going to connect them. And you'd start to see QR codes and URLs being listed, but still this was one thing and this was the other. And the thought that occurred to me is, you guys were introducing the topic was the shifts in technology via the Ubers, the Airbnbs, as prime examples of the last 5-10 years, have created new space for different connections with online. So you go to Airbnb's homepage today, and they're not just showcasing really cool places around the world, though they do that. They're showcasing the events. You can go rent the Beetlejuice house right now. That event is still live. You could do Polly Pocket's house a few weeks ago. These are very different ways of reaching audiences that are bridging the gap between that online and real world in new ways. And then you amplify that with the number of cameras in everybody's pockets that are showing up on Instagram, and all of a sudden that line is blurred drastically. In a way that it wasn't before. And sure, you can just do offline marketing and just create the various real world experiences, and you can just do online. But I think the ones that are most interesting are where those start to blur in a way they didn't a number of years ago. And it's harder to pull off too, right? That takes takes infrastructure, it takes a lot of planning, logistics, in a way that if you're just going to do an offline, that takes time. If you're going to do online, you can be sort of quick and with the moment. That boring of the two is, I don't know, it's curious. It's got both quick turnaround, but also there can be a lot of planning going into those.
A fascinating example. I was just thinking the Polly Pocket one. I hadn't heard of that. Not surprising. I missed my news feed. For some reason, I don't know why. Maybe it wasn't in the target demographic on that one. But just thinking, if there was a local hotel organization who put together something like that, and they wanted to spread the information about that, that's local highway interstate billboards, that's local news, basically try to hit that, as much as possible. And who eventually is going to rent that? A local person, or somebody who's just slightly outside of that, who heard about it because somebody called up their best friend who knows, man, this person loves this, they're going to love it. But that's about it. I mean, your geographic area of impact is small.
Well, let me challenge you on that, because with the other things that we talked about, with the kind of the bifurcation of the audiences and the mass media, like one of the biggest things that was promised to us with the social media things was, you can let your freak flag fly and you can find people who are like you, even though you're trapped in Kalamazoo. If you're into My Little Pony, my God, there's some people for you to hang out with, right? Like that was...
I think no number of that.
Right? Like whatever you're into, you can find people for. So now that interest-based targeting became such a big thing, right? And in order to serve experiences to those interest-based people, right? I mean, think of the rise of Comic-Con. That was not a thing until all of a sudden San Diego was like a complete takeover, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of died down, but I mean, maybe not. I'm not in that audience. So you could do the Polly Pocket targeting with your digital and actually spur some tourism.
That's kind of my point, though. I mean, like old media would be stuck to local. You add online version to it. And then suddenly now you've spread this message far and wide, but also very thin application far and wide. You're not just doing a billboard like a mass media, anybody on the interstate, by the way. Instead, you've got a much thinner spread of media across a much, much larger geographic area. Because you're doing that interest-based targeting, you are hitting those individuals who would only be interested in this particular kind of experience. Maybe they'll push it along a little bit, and it's a little bit more broad of just people who want fascinating, fun experiences. Maybe it's influencers who need new content, and man, they would love to have that house so that they could get some videos done. Like, right. There's a certain little pocket markets that you have that availability kind of spread out to now with digital marketing that you really didn't have prior to that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a cool technology. There's a cool set there.
I have a funny Polly Pocket story, but that's for after the recording. Right. The thing that came to mind when I was listening to Ruthi was the speed at which you can do campaigns. That's definitely something that's changed. I think the really famous one, at least that got a lot of people thinking of this like real-time marketing, was the Super Bowl in New Orleans, where the power went out, and within like half an hour, Oreo had a dunk in the dark advertisement, which was amazing. Still one of my favorite things. But then last year, a local example for us, when the Timberwolves got to the Western Conference Finals and Anthony Edwards was interviewed by TNT, Charles Barkley was like, I haven't been there in 20 years. Anthony Edwards said, bring your ass. And that became the Minnesota Tourism Board slogan within like an hour. It was great. It was wonderful. The fact that people are paying that close of attention and have the ability to say yes on, creative and launching things. And like, that is a wonderful world. Now, granted, that campaign doesn't stay very long, right? The exception to that is what Sweden has done with their tourism advertisement when President Biden had a gaffe and he messed up Switzerland and Sweden. So then the tourism minister of Sweden put together this whole campaign on what's Swedish, what's Swiss. And basically, they've done a bunch of different campaigns on that. And it's great. It is one of my favoriteest things. At least from marketing. Yeah.
Some of the examples that you just described reminded me of another big shift that has occurred, albeit subtly. And I'm going to call it the rise of micro conversations. It might have a name and I just don't know what it is. And what I'm thinking about is you've got all these different conversations happening and you've got brands engaging with these different conversations. And there's that idea of like, be there in the moment, be there, part of the conversation, stay relevant. But part of that is you are not talking to the wide audience. You're not casting a wide net. You're talking to a very specific audience who is paying attention at that time and place. Like that Timberwolves example, never heard of it. Wouldn't be on my radar. It's not within my bubbles. You're targeting people who are in specific bubbles. Whereas as I think back, that started maybe 10 years ago. Like it was there because of course the internet was sort of opening all the conversations that were happening. But I think there was much more of a likelihood that people were watching the exact same video across, right? That there was a smaller set of things that were more widely seen, whereas now you have a much wider set of things seen by smaller audiences, which makes room for very, very cool, very specific conversations, like the Polly Pocket thing. Great example. It's not going to be a wide audience who's super excited about the Polly Pocket house, but if you get your niche, you're good to go. And that flourishing, I think, is definitely a shift that's happened. You have to be much more targeted. And in doing so, you've got to be much more relevant to the conversation at the time.
Yeah, the full-time versus happenstance influencer rise is quite the change. I mean, you look at YouTube videos today, even some of the creators who were around kind of during the original kind of rise of it, their videos used to have millions of views, and it was the same kind of content that's being produced, same category of content they're producing today, and now it's hundreds of thousands at best. I mean, if they're doing really well, it's still hundreds of thousands, or it's maybe even less. Because there's so many new entrants into that same category on YouTube. There's just that many more options. And while they've improved heavily their quality of filming, their knowledge of filming, their knowledge of, what makes a good short versus a long form video and all the rest of that, others have too. I mean, that rise still happened, and that, spread and diversity happened as well. So, that's a very difficult place to play in right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think if the way things have changed, that when I mentioned the the field of dreams mentality of, you build your audience, you build your website, you build your social profiles, and it'll be magically there. For probably the last 5-6 years, I've been saying in most conversations, like, all right, if you want to do this, if you want to have that organic presence, you also need to have some paid behind it. Like, if you really want it to perform, unless you're this, crazy large established brand already, you're going to have some ad dollars to support what you're doing, because that's going to be one of the only ways you can break through. Unless you do some sort of like crazy guerrilla marketing, which is really fun and exciting, but to Ruthi's point, takes a lot of pre-planning, which, how many businesses or people in business do you know that have that level of creativity or take the time in order to have that level of creativity, right? Because with all of the tools that we've had, I think each employee is expected to do more and more and more, which has just led to more and more and more mediocrity. Like we talked about in the Average Age of Marketing show, right?
Yeah, I would say even big media or big brands still have to do advertising as well. My favorite example of that is Nesquik, Nestle's chocolate powder drink. Mm-hmm. It has two large audiences. There's an audience in their 30s and 40s, and there's an audience who is around 12. And they stopped advertising in between. So they lost the entire basically middle spectrum. But you had this group that basically grew up with it, and it's the nostalgic still thing that they do. Mm-hmm. And then you got this young audience that's basically is their primary target that hits that. And then they gapped for this big section in between because they didn't put money toward it. I mean, product that's available in all the stores, not moving.
That's interesting, because that's very similar to the life cycle of a lot of bands. You will see this like steady rise, and then they're good, and then their audience ages out, right? Because they have kids and jobs, and they're exhausted, and they don't really want to go downtown, for a 9 p.m. show. And then you have the comeback tours, because the kids are grown and people have expendable cash now, and they're ready to revisit what they, used to listen to. Right. So you get all those reunion tours when it's like 45, 50, yeah, that's funny. Ruthi, you're thinking hard. What are you?
Well, I'm thinking about, Alex, you guys' thoughts about paid advertising and that just being a constant. And the thought that comes to mind is just that the numbers of ways that we reach our audiences, or rather, not the number of ways, but the variations in the ways that you might go about reaching your audience has just expanded. And paid advertising continues to be one continued way of reaching your audience. It's not the only way. Dave, to your point, you can do the guerrilla marketing, and that takes a whole bunch of new forms because we have new technologies available. As does the paid advertising. That might be one way that the shift has happened of how you ran paid advertising, depending on what your product was 10 years ago, is quite different than where you pay for that advertising today. And perhaps that's the shift, not so much more paid advertising or less, just where and how wide of an audience you can reach.
There's a piece of it that still is true. I mean, just a more general statement that's before to now, which is if there is an audience that you want to guarantee reach or expand the reach of, and it's worth money to you to do so, then advertising makes sense. If it's an audience that may or may not care, you're probably not going to want to put money toward it. That hasn't changed ever.
Right.
So it's a question of, do you want that audience, and is that the right audience for you? Which there's still a whole bunch of scattering of that's happened. I mean, yes, we don't have Yellow Pages ads anymore because that book isn't even sent out anymore. I mean, like, that's entirely shifted and changed. You have now Google Maps advertisements, though. Yes. Or just had a patent for their infotainment center to now list ads and listen to you at all times, to say that if someone says they're hungry, they'll play an ad for a local restaurant. Real fun. I'm sure the distracted driving lawsuits will just pile up and it'll be great. But there's opportunities there. If you really want to hit that audience, you can pay for it. You can find an option to do so. If otherwise, I think, both of you are still talking about this idea that there is an organic method out there. It's high creativity to break through. It's knowing your audience really well. Like Dave, you mentioned the NBA version. That works with some audiences, but that phrase won't work with other audiences. I mean, it'll be like you're going to have to hit that line in between. And for kind of state-approved budget, maybe you got somebody who is going to approve that and somebody who won't. I mean, that's a line there. Same thing with Oreo, to be able to turn that thing around and actually make that footage, that meme, that photography that fast. Like, they knew their audience, they wanted that audience, they went for it, and they had the creativity to basically kind of push through and be a part of that audience. It still is an option there.
I was just thinking with that, because we've talked a lot about audience generation and finding an audience and building it, right? That's one of the favorite things to talk about. But the really hard thing to do is to maintain the audience. Right. And I don't think a lot of businesses have a lot of conversations around that, even though we know all the statistics that show, maintaining your customers is much better and cost effective than not. The flip side of that, though, is Oreo, I think, is another good example of this, where it's like, if I want an Oreo, I just want double stuffed, because that's the right ratio of frosting to cookie, right? If you do thins, forget it. No. But then what Oreo has done with the audience piece has, you get 20,000 flavor combinations where it's like, please don't take a good thing and cheapen it. Like, now, have I tried 80% of them?
You're amazing,
yeah,
Dave.
I have. But what? What's amazing?
The combinations, they're great.
Some of them are, yeah. Others are like, who doesn't have taste buds on their tongue? Like,
Dave, there's a Malcolm Gladwell Prego. Just anybody who's interested, you can look at that. It's also called Pepsi Pepsi's Not Pepsi.
Yeah.
And there's basically a long and short is, why on earth are there so many different spaghetti sauce flavors of the same company, same brand? There's a ton of different jars, all these different flavors. Why? Why do you need all this different stuff? And it basically is, you have groupings of audiences. There's the Pepsi thing is just because of the amount of sweetener in a Diet Pepsi in their nationwide study. Turns out there was no answer. There is no Pepsi. There's no perfect one. There's a bunch. And there's some pretty large groupings that hit each one of them. So really you need like 6. And same thing with the pasta sauces. You need like 12 because of your groupings that are out there.
Yeah,
you
with
probably
garlic,
still have the
without,
majority.
with basil, not. Yeah. No, I mean, I get the taste preferences is a unique thing for specifically food. However, I don't think it's necessary to ruin a good thing, you know?
That's fair.
Good thing to who, Dave? Good thing to who?
Look in a different direction. This is something I wanted to bring up. It's kind of just a little bit of a raw thought for me. I haven't really fully formed it yet. But the thing that I've been kind of amazed by also, if we're talking about this same period of time, is the increase of specialization of solutions.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is I recently bought a piece of furniture. Today, I have tens of thousands of options for this exact same piece of furniture. And even I found the one that I wanted. I even did a Google Lens photo of it and found 24 different sellers with pricing ranging up to 100% more than the lowest with the exact same product, obviously shipped from the exact same manufacturer, from the exact same location, but all these different sellers with all these different price points on all these different platforms for all available to me to buy today. And if I buy it and it's the wrong size, the fault is mine. Mm-hmm. If I buy it and the color's a little off, I feel like the fault is mine because I had options. And before I didn't have options, it was whatever's available at Target is it, and I'm done. There's no other options. Therefore, That's it. They only had a white one. I wanted black. I get a white one today because there's no choice. I blame Target. Now I blame myself.
Right. NPR had an interesting show on, or an interesting segment on white labeling and the rise of that. Mm-hmm. And the reporter had the same thing where we needed to buy a table. We found this one table at a certain, their preferred store, mm-hmm. but because the reporter was doing this piece, looked into it and found the manufacturer was white labeling it for the store. And if you bought it from this other store online, it was 40% cheaper.
Yep.
Same table, just a different distributor, totally different pricing. And at that point, it's like, well, the system feels rigged.
This is like when you learn that Abercrombie and Hot Topic are owned by the same parent company in high school, and you go, well, screw it. We're done.
Yeah.
You mean we can get along, the jocks and the goths and the...
Capitalism makes use of it all.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to kind of further that piece, think about the manufacturer from 10 years ago versus today. That manufacturer from 10 years ago had one product and was able to capture a larger audience because there was those who wanted it and those who wanted things that were like it, but there wasn't an available option. So they bought it too. Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, I've got 24 different sellers who may or may not actually be different companies. They might actually all be one company with, 24 listings, let's be honest. Mm-hmm. But I have so many more options now. So my audience that manufacturer can reach is now a much smaller segment as well. So you're still trying to break through and gain that audience, but the specialization and the ability to search for these finite things. And if my particular plumber doesn't have the phrase that I'm looking for on their website, I go with the other one who does, mm-hmm. where it was just a list of plumbers and you called and that was it.
Well, the manufacturing thing is an interesting example too, because the volumes of the production runs have changed over the last, right? Because as each audience gets more specialized and each audience gets smaller and smaller because of that specialization, you can no longer do these like crazy huge production runs of whatever it is. You need to be much more nimble in your manufacturing processes, which obviously changes the the pricing and the money around it.
Like the Shine landfills, like fast fashion, and the massive landfills basically that are just filled with unworn, unpurchased clothing because they did a production run and it didn't sell or some sold and the rest didn't, and they threw away the rest. it was profitable at some point to do that. And you wouldn't have that before because your inventory just wouldn't be that diverse and replaceable.
I think that this is a topic we should explore more. And it's been something that has been lingering in the back of my head. Alex, to your point of being sort of an unformed thought, it's definitely a shift. You can see it. Wayfair and its ilk didn't exist 10 years ago or so, or they were much smaller. Now they're pervasive, right? If you're online furniture shopping, that's one of the many things that you're going to see, and you're going to see the same table on Wayfair as you do on 3 other websites that all have a similar idea, but might be skinned with slightly different theming on them. And that's been a dramatic change. And part of it is the online technologies that enable it, but a huge piece of it is the manufacturing infrastructure behind it, which has sort of grown in its ability to find different ways of making similar furniture at lower costs, so that they can enable all these different variations. Similar deal with fast fashion. You can recreate the same garment, but you can take little shortcuts in the types of fabrics or the types of stitching you do to make it less expensive. And all of a sudden you can see that same garment at Target, but it's a completely different level of quality, even if it looks very similar. And I haven't quite formed many opinions, just it's an observation. It's something that's definitely a difference in our world today than it was before. There's some things that certainly are beneficial, and there's a lot of things that I go, I don't know if I like that so much. And perhaps it doesn't matter if I like it or not. That's just how things are shifting. But it's a good one to explore.
The other piece on that is shipping and logistics as well. And I don't know if necessarily the pricing really has dropped all that much, or if just the profit margins have eroded away to basically fit the customer demand of free shipping, or what appears to be free shipping. I mean, we all kind of know that's a false notion because you are still paying for the product and you're paying for shipping in some direction. But the speed of shipping as well. I mean, there's so many other kind of pieces there too. So you could have so much delivered so quickly.
I think the piece that gets me is like, to what extent are we better off as individuals? There's certainly a case to be made in a number of different areas where having a greater amount of choices is good, right? If your foot's super weirdly shaped, it doesn't benefit you to have a very small variety of shoes to choose from because you just get left in foot pain, right? And for those who are particularly interested in interior designing, finding that perfectly shaped table to fit that weird spot can be a real benefit. So there's a ton of benefits when we think about very niche cases. But then I think about your example of like, now it's my fault. Wouldn't it have been better if there was just sort of a generic?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets funny because there's this weird kind of purchase and research side of things where it used to be very word of mouth focused of what people mentioned and what your friends said, family members and the like. Now we have online reviews, so I don't need to talk to my friends and family for reviews anymore. So that conversation's kind of dead. That was the funny one that came up recently, was the little bit of a side, but it was giving directions. I was talking to some family members of mine and they were trying to give me directions to a place. And I was like, I put in my phone. I don't need directions. They were like debating whether or not I should take this highway or this highway. I'm like, whatever Google Maps tells me is what I'm going to be taking. Let's be honest. Like, I go where it tells me, not what I thought.
How else do you kill an afternoon though, Alex? Like,
what? Disgusting highway conditions. Yeah. But to get to the consumer research side of it, there is, of course, fake reviews and that like out there too. There's Consumer Reports and other sites that try to contain a somewhat reviewed set of products as well, and it's a smaller selection. We always got to get this kind of like push and pull atmosphere to that as well, where you can research it to death. You can just buy it. Maybe we're better off because we're not buying inferior products as often, but let's be honest, the person who left the 1-star review bought it. So it still was bought. Maybe it just wasn't bought as many times.
I think this has been a really fun conversation. I think one of the things that I would like to explore further, but it's probably a next episode, honestly, with this specialization and continued look at specialization. One of the things that I've noticed in search marketing, content marketing, that sort of organic piece, like whatever's left of that, there is more and more importance on expertise. And what do the robots think you are an expert in? And are you going in and out of your expertise? Because I don't know, maybe you think about other things than just the one thing you're known for, right? Like, that I think will be a fun thing to unpack, much like this conversation was fun. So if you've enjoyed this, give us a like, give us a share, give us the word of mouth, let your friends know, rate and review, because we do look at those and look for those, and that will help shape what we do. So thanks for listening. We will see you next time on Enterprise in Mind.
Thanks, all.
Cheers.